Hi everyone, and welcome to CTO Craft Bites. Today we're talking with Marc Adler to answer your questions on being a fractional CTO. If this is your first time at CTO Craft Bites, let me tell you a little bit more about this group. CTO Craft is a mentoring and coaching community for technology leaders around the world, focusing on supporting technologists in their leadership growth. Community members are over 5,000, and CTO Craft provides them with one-on-one coaching, mentoring groups, a curated Slack community, and events like this one. Also, a huge thanks to our headline partner, AWS, for helping make these bites possible. I am Glyn Roberts. I'm emceeing today's session, and I'm CTO of Digital Solutions at iTechR. With me is Marc Adler, former CTO of XP Investments, Chief Architect at Citigroup, MetLife, and ADP, and former CTO of various startups. That's quite a title, Marc. Welcome. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Oh, thanks. Thanks so much for that great introduction. So I've been around IT for forever. I mean, I was one of the first Windows developers on Wall Street writing trader workstations for the equity group at Goldman Sachs way back when. And then I left there to start my own company, wrote a bunch of products, grew the company, sold it. A couple of years later, went back to consulting. I managed to kind of stumble upon this really interesting advertisement for an architect at Citigroup. The advertisement said you could be a musician, you could be a geologist, whatever, as long as you're creative. And I'm a musician, so I responded to the ad and became the architect for the equities group. And then when my boss left, I got promoted to chief architect, and that was my introduction to being chief architect or CTO for a large company. Since then, I've been around the block. I went to Citadel, the big hedge fund in New York and Chicago, to lead the development for their new investment bank, which sadly didn't last. Then I went back to consulting. As a consultant, led the IT department for British Petroleum's energy trading operation in Chicago, left there to become chief architect of MetLife, the big insurance company, left there to join a startup, left there to join ADP. In between, I've had a couple of sabbaticals, which I like to give myself in order to learn new technology. So my first sabbatical, I wanted to write a clone of Uber, the Uber app. So I taught myself Scala, and I taught myself Akka and the Play framework, etc. So at the end of 2018, I reached a particular milestone, which my wife and I had set out for ourselves many years ago. And I retired early from ADP. And I said, what am I going to do right now? And all of these years, people were asking me to help them with applications. I would have all these people who wanted to write applications, were not technical. I'd say, hey, I'm too busy. Let's just go for a beer and I'll tell you how to do that. And then when I left, I said, what am I going to do now? So instead of sitting in front of the telly every day watching soccer, I said, let me kind of hang a shingle out on my front door, call myself CTO as a service, and go into consulting. And that's what I did. So that's kind of the long and short. As I said, I was a musician, specializing in classical percussion and drum sets. I'm teaching myself guitar now. And I also had a little stint flying airplanes, but that's it for me.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us today. Yeah, soccer, football for the rest of you, of course, in the UK. With the audience, you can ask your questions at any time from the Ask a Question option just below the video. I see a few of you already started throwing your questions in, which is great. And yeah, let's kick off about talking about the world of the fractional CTO. So with obviously your wealth of experience in this, Marc, let's start with a quick overview of what is a fractional CTO.
Okay, so I would probably like to get into eventually what is a CTO, because word CTO can mean many things to different people and to different roles. But a fractional CTO is somebody who will come in and lead the technology organization of a company on an interim basis. And you could have multiple clients. In other words, you can time slice your time between multiple clients. So give them maybe each one of them 5 hours a week, 5 hours a month. For me, there's no minimum. And the other kind of model is to go in, let's say that a CTO of a well-established company leaves, and they need somebody just to fill in that position for a little while they do their job search. There's the going in and being actually a full-time CTO, but on a consulting basis. So I do the former. I have multiple clients and I do time slicing between each one of those clients. So what a fractional CTO will do, depending on the life cycle of the client, is, for me, I do lots and lots of stuff. So what I do is, if I go in with a non-technical founder, I will basically guide their path for them to be able to write their app, which includes pushing them to do the product requirements. I do the technical architecture and the technical specs. I hire the development team and vet the developers. I run the development organization. I will often do a lot of the cloud administration and the cloud architecture. I'll meet with investors and VCs. So it runs the entire gamut of things that you need to do to help a startup get their product out the door.
Okay, great. And why would someone actually want to hire a fractional CTO instead of, let's say, a full-time CTO?
Okay, so I think a lot of it is related to budget, right? So if you were going to hire a full-time experienced CTO, first of all, it's difficult to find those kinds of experienced CTOs to join you on a full-time basis unless you were granting lots of equity or you had some sort of track record. So I think that for a lot of startup founders, they just don't have the financial resources to be able to hire somebody who's full-time. So with a fractional CTO, and I know that there's different philosophies about how you get paid on an hourly basis. Others have a monthly retainer, but it's very cost effective for somebody to hire a CTO by the hour or for a couple of hours a month based on a retainer. You don't have to give away equity. It's actually a very small amount of the budget relative to what the actual development effort would cost. And plus, a CTO does not have to be there full time, unless they're coding full time. And I think that for the kind of services that I provide and some other fractional CTOs provide, we can do coding, but we're there really to do the mentoring and to lead the whole effort rather than to sit there and be paid to code.
Okay, we'll definitely come back onto the coding piece shortly. So in the industry, just actually going for one of the audience's questions already, do organizations actually understand what CTO as a service or fractional CTOs actually are? Is it commonly understood already?
No, it isn't. And that's why sessions like this are great. So when I first started out at the end of 2018, there was really the word fractional CTO or the term CTO as a service was relatively new. I mean, I could say that I was probably, just looking at my LinkedIn posts, one of the few out there. And I had to do a lot of education. And I did that a lot through my website, through ad hoc conversations with people. But you actually had to build the market to tell people, hey, you can hire yourself a senior technical leader, but you don't have to pay the prices of a full-time one. And people had no idea that there was something like that out there. So what people with a lot of startup founders would do is they would not hire a senior technical leader, and they would just make a couple of pages of Figma sketches and just kind of throw it over the fence at a development company and hope that something good comes back. Since then, I have to say that the field of fractional CTOs or CTO as a service has gotten a lot more crowded. And that now, just because there are so many people out there on LinkedIn with the title of fractional CTO, is bringing a lot more awareness to founders and to companies that they could have this kind of model.
Okay, so would you say, because right now fractional CTO is definitely a hot topic in the tech industry with a lot of people looking to be in that industry, do you see an accelerating demand for fractional CTOs to match that?
I see a lot. Yes, I see a lot more people who have come to me with the awareness that they have to have a fractional CTO. I mean, I spoke to one client the other day who I just signed, and I said, "How did you find me?" They said, "I just Googled CTO as a service, and you came up on the first page." So I see that there is that awareness, and I'm getting a lot more hits. And luckily, there's enough of a supply out there to fill the demand. So it is accelerating, mainly on the startup end. I don't see that much on the large company end of things, but on the startup end, now people know that there is that viable option.
Okay, great. So yeah, I see a lot of people obviously here consider themselves as fractional CTOs because they're all sharing their LinkedIn on the chat. What I think would be interesting is to answer a couple of client questions, which I've come across, and because things keep on moving around, it's hard to keep track of where they all are. So essentially, as we're talking about these types of clients and fractionals, who is an ideal client for CTO as a service business? Because you were touching on that about the earlier stage startups seem to be most interested.
Right. So for me, and I'm just talking about my tastes personally, I like to come in at the very beginning. I like to have a startup founder who has a great idea, but has no idea what to do technology-wise, and is really looking for that kind of help from the very, very start. So somebody who comes to me and says, "Mark, I have an idea to do this. I've done my market research. I think it's a great idea. I have zero idea how to start." So what I would do with them is first make them get their product specs ready, and then I would do everything from writing the technical specs to doing the architecture to hiring the development team to everything. And that is the exact place I like to come in, when there's totally greenfield and where I have total control of the architecture and of the technology. What I really don't like to do that much, although I have to admit I have a lot of clients in this space, are clients where I have to do a repair job. These are the startup founders who didn't know about the world of fractional CTOs. They had some sort of wireframes done in Figma or Sketch or something like that. They found some sort of development shop because they looked at a site like Clutch or somebody gave them a recommendation. They threw the specs over the wall at this development company, and they waited a couple of months until the development company came back with something. And a lot of times, development companies, coding is not perfect, and founders get delivered imperfect products, and then they come to me saying, "Hey, Mark, could you help us fix this?" And then I have to deal with a company that already has an architecture, that already has a code base, that already has a lot of the stuff built in. And yeah, I'll have these people as clients, but it's not my preferred model. I want to be there at the very, very beginning.
Okay, so coming on to the next audience question, actually, how can a young or newer startup afford a fractional CTO before they've raised their first investment round? Do you see this as an issue?
Well, again, my model is hourly. And this kind of gets into the, I know that there's a guy named Jonathan Hall who has very popular posts about never do hourly work. I'm hourly, right? And relative to my experience out there as a real world CTO, I consider myself fairly affordable. And a lot of the founders that I meet will be bootstrapped first on friends and family money, right? So if you are going to get a CTO who's working on an hourly basis, and you have friends and family money, it's very affordable to get a CTO like myself for about 10 hours a month. Right. So I think that you don't have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. You don't have to get equity. You don't have to give away equity. So I would say that on just friends and family, or money, or your personal savings, it's fairly affordable to get somebody to guide you on these initial steps. Because if you don't have that kind of senior leadership and you're just throwing stuff over the fence at a development company and you're getting back something that you're not satisfied with, it's going to be a lot more expensive later to fix it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So, like, twisting this round now to actually being a fractional CTO, what experience do you believe you need to have to qualify as a fractional CTO? Considering that, I've seen, very legitimate people like yourself being fractional CTOs, but then you've also got people with 3 years development experience saying, oh, I'm also a fractional CTO. Where is the line? How do you identify what would you qualify as a legitimate fractional CTO?
Okay, so this is a hot topic with me because I've been in this position officially in large and small companies. And when I do see somebody who has 3 years of development experience all of a sudden saying that they're going to be a fractional CTO, I kind of wonder what kind of credentials they really bring. So one of the things that I would say distinguishes uh, what I would consider a fractional CTO is what I call the gravitas that they bring. So let's say that a startup company is going for some investments. They go and meet somebody at Sandhill or the Andreessen funds or somewhere like that. And they say, here is my executive team. We have lots and lots of experience at building enterprise class applications that scale, blah, blah, blah. So I think that one of the things that a VC will look for is the amount of experience that the technical team has, that the CTO team has, what they call the gravitas. And I think that for somebody who's been a CTO in the real world and had lots of experience among different startups and different very large organizations and have had to tackle lots and lots of problems, and they have kind of the battle scars of being a CTO out there. I think that VCs look for that kind of experience. If a startup comes to certain VCs and says, my CTO is somebody who has been just a senior developer for 2 years, then I think as a VC, they might want to see somebody with a lot more experience. Now, on my website, I have an article saying about what has a chief architect or a CTO done? Like, are the job responsibilities? And I list about 50 different things that I've done in the past in these roles, including facing off with CEOs and CTOs of largish and medium-sized companies, attending executive board meetings, leading development efforts, doing architecture, and plus having the experience to solve all of the political problems that you usually come up with in these kinds of companies. So I would say that what I would consider a fractional CTO is somebody who does have actual experience as a CTO dealing with all sorts of different issues. And I also think that somebody with the CTO title should be the highest technical authority in a company. That if you're hiring a development company and your developers come up with different kinds of architectural decisions or question you on things, you should have the technical chops to be able to justify decisions or to be able to arbitrate between different kinds of choices. Right? So I think that comes with years of experience. Not every CTO has to have 30 plus years of experience like I do, but you have to have a lot of experience out there in order to be a CTO who I would feel comfortable with as a startup founder.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen, I think there's one university course in America where you can do a qualification in being a CTO. And I
Yeah.
don't know what the value of that is, because as you say, it's all about experience. What I've known as being a CTO is all the bad things that have happened to me and how I've had to tackle them. And that's the experience that you bring as a CTO.
Yeah, and I think I've seen that. I think it's University of Pennsylvania advertises, yes, they have a CTO program. So pay us money, and then a few months later, you're a CTO. And you need a lot of those battle scars. You need to be out there walking the trading floor at Citigroup when a trader hurls an ashtray at you saying, "Hey, Mark, the system crashed when I was trying to make a trade," right? So you need just that kind of stuff.
Okay. And one other point just on that you mentioned there, being the highest technical authority, to my understanding, that doesn't mean you are the best coder in the business. You don't need to be the best coder. You don't need to be the best architect, but you need to be able to have the conversations around code quality and architecture. Do you agree with that?
I do. So I would not consider myself the best coder. I mean, I've written lots and lots of code. I've developed commercial products, but I would hope that the developers that I engage are much better coders than I am. I don't know every line of syntax of Terraform, right? I need a Terraform developer or some kind of DevOps developer. I would certainly hope that they're a lot better than I am. But yes, you have to be able to understand the code, to know when there's code smells, to know when there's bad code and bad architecture. And I even like to say you should be able to go at any time and sit down and be able to pair program with somebody. You don't have to be the one writing code, but you could be the one actually looking over the shoulder and giving suggestions and things like that. So yes, you don't have to be the best coder, but I feel that you have to have that kind of background to be able to recognize bad code, to be able to give helpful suggestions to developers, and to be able to participate in pull requests and to give your honest feedback on pull requests.
Great. Okay, then. So next audience questions are lined up to what my next question was around how you actually find new work. So the question is, to start the journey as a fractional CTO, how to step in for finding work as someone who hasn't actually, who's spent their whole career in a particular organization but doesn't have outside contacts. So is all your work contact driven, network driven, or is your website doing it? How do you bring in new work?
Okay, so I do have my website. So early on, when I first started, I spent a week or two writing a website, polishing it, writing articles, filling it with content, going back to friends and family, saying, "Hey, how does this look? Would you buy something from me, given this website?" And I had a lot of feedback, and so I have a website which I feel proud of. Other than that, it's been a lot of word of mouth. Being in the industry for 30 years, you have a lot of connections. And I would just say that it's a lot of word of mouth, where when people found out that I was doing this and they saw a need, people would often say, "Why don't you call Marc Adler? He has this CTO as a service, and I think he could help you." Right now, as I mentioned, it's very crowded out there. You can put on LinkedIn that you are a fractional CTO, and I see a lot of people with that title. But I think that you have to really be able to distinguish yourself, and so you have to have a lot of really great content out there. You have to get your name around. You have to I think you have to actually go out there and meet people. I don't do that, right? I'm somebody who I always had a rule that I would never cold call anybody. I've never gotten I've never put out mass marketing messages. I've never hired any kind of public relations firm. I've never hired a salesperson. But I think that now that COVID has kind of ended and meetups are now in person, if you're going to get out there, go to meetups, go to things that you're interested in, and just introduce yourself. Just talk to people, tell them what you're about, and eventually your name will get around. And then participate in various Slack groups, like the CTO Craft Slack group, and just get your name around. Just make sure that people know that you're in business doing this stuff.
Great. Okay, then. So let's actually talk about the job itself then. what type of work is actually expected of you as a CTO? I know you touched on this a little bit already, but could you just give us a quick overview of what the key expectations of you are? And then if you also have any main KPIs for any fractional CTO work.
All right. So what's expected of me is to just get out there, hire the delivery team, and just build the product, right? So that's all the founder wants to see, and they also want to have me on their pitch deck so that they could get additional funding. But the job for me is just to do whatever it takes to organize my non-technical founder to have them to have me be successful at delivering a product. So sometimes what that means is me forcing the founder to actually start writing product documentation. A lot of people don't like to do that. A lot of people do not want to sit there and think about every single screen, every single use case, about not only success criteria, but failure criteria, how you would recover workflow-wise from some sort of failure scenario, etc. So part of my job at the beginning is getting the founder to kind of organize what they want, to ask lots and lots of questions, and to say, hey, what happens in this in your application if you're searching for a house but there's no houses that come up? What happens? Or can you automatically let somebody expand their search radius by X amount or whatever? And so to sit down with the founder to understand every part of the application and to ask lots of questions. Then what I like to do is have them flush out all the specs, all of the specs. So meaning don't only consider what you want for your MVP, but think of the future state. Think of where you want the product 5 years from now, because when we architect the product, even though we might not implement something, we want that architecture to be a solid, scalable architecture. And so 5 years from now, you don't have to go back and rewrite the whole thing. So that's part of it. It's getting all the specs, etc. Sometimes they don't even know that they have to hire a UX designer. Sometimes they don't even know that there's tools out there like Figma. So sometimes the next stage is going and getting all of the UX work done and vetting that. Then it's hiring the development team, right? So there are tons of development teams out there. I mean, I get pitched 10 times a day from all sorts of countries saying we have the best developers in the world. I'm not sure how 10,000 development companies all have the best 1% of the developers in the world, but it's going out and finding talking to different development organizations, being on the calls with the founders, asking the kinds of questions that the founders should ask but don't know how to ask, around costs, around guarantees, around the benches, around technology stacks, things like that. Helping the founders evaluate the development companies. Then what I do is I actually go and interview each developer who is proposed for the team. Not a lot of people will do that. Some people will just trust that the development company will come with a prepackaged team for them. I don't. So I will interview all the developers. We'll get the development teams together. Then what I will do is, usually there's not a separate project manager. So I will actually have to do some of the project management as far as creating sprints and things like that. And then what I do is I run the sprints. I will do the cloud work, as I mentioned. I'll make sure the development team is on track, at least for the first couple of sprints. I'll examine every one of the check-ins. I'll make sure everything is going well. And then it's just a matter of having meetings with the development teams 2 or 3 times a week, make sure everything is good, and then having constant meetings with the founder to be able to come up with the next sprints, to come up with any kind of products we want to evaluate, etc. So that's kind of my life as a fractional CTO. And I would say that my greatest success is the number of times I've been fired, because that's what you want to do, right? You want to be, after a couple of months, you want to be fired, and you want your founder to be able to hire a permanent CTO. And at that point, I will start to interview permanent CTO candidates and then kind of leave it at that.
Okay. It does sound like a large list that you just listed off there, especially if you're working in a fractional capacity. So essentially, I assume that you are communicating where your time's going to be allocated to the CEO of this is how you're going to do it. Is like, I'm trying to get around to the KPI piece. What do you tell the CEO as what your value you're going to bring as an actual output?
Right. So generally, my goal is to bring them a full product, whether it be an MVP or whatever they decide, within budget, right? So that is the main KPI that I have is watching the budget, making sure that everything is developed within budget and according to spec. So that's kind of the main way that I get judged and I judge myself. And as part of that, and one of the things that is also important in my job, I'm not sure if every fractional CTO does this, is I help my my founders constrain costs. So at the end of the month, they will get a bill from the remote development company saying, here's what we've done, here's how much it costs. And sometimes what I can do is I can call bullshit on some of those bills. So I'll take a look at the bills, or I'll take a thing and say, yeah, this developer charged 8 hours for changing a spelling in a word. No, we're going to kind of push back on that. So I think as part of those KPIs is how much money I could actually save my founders, right? So and that's part of bringing everything in on budget.
Okay, great. And being able to call bullshit, I think, is a very valuable trait, even in a full-time capacity, because it's important that you do understand what's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Just actually, while you're talking about the product side of things there, one of the questions is, for many startups, the fractional CPO may also be a good fit. Where do you see the line between a fractional CTO and a fractional CPO sit?
Okay, so as CTO, I do not, it's not my responsibility to do market research or come up with the specs of the product. For me, I am just concerned about the technical end of things, right? So one of the things I have to admit is that I'm kind of a mercenary, right? I will get a client, I will bill an hourly rate, and I will do the technical job for the client that I'm hired to do. It's not up to me to validate the market suitability of the product or to come up with additional specs or to do market research, things like that. So I do encourage the founders when they have the budget to hire a CPO, to have that CPO do all of the market research to come up with all the specs, etc. Some of my clients will have the budget to do that, but I could, as an adult, as somebody who's experienced in the real world, I can ask a lot of questions and say, hey, did you consider this kind of feature for your business? But generally, I do not do that. I will just take care of the technical end, and I will always advocate to the founder that they hire a chief product officer and they work with somebody who will be able to do the business specs and to be able to flush out all the requirements.
Or the CEO themselves will be taking over that responsibility?
They should. The CEO will know best what they need, but they don't always know what they need. And this is where an experienced CPO has great domain knowledge can come in handy. As a CTO, and, you know, the great thing about being a fractional CTO, one of the hidden joys of being a fractional CTO, is that you hop from domain to domain. And you don't have to be a domain expert in anything, but you learn along the way. So while I've been fractional CTO, I've had clients in the health tech industry, in insurance tech, in real estate, in ed tech, in even sex education, right? So it's you learn a lot of things along the way, but I don't feel qualified to write any of those specs. The CEO will often know their market, but I will often for instance, even with one of my ex-clients in the real estate field, I came across a new platform for real estate tech, and I sent the link to her. I said, "Hey, this thing has something that you might want to consider." So I'm always kind of feeding ideas to my CEOs, but you do expect the CEO to know what they want out of their product.
Okay, great. Right then. So actually, one of the most upvoted questions from the audience so far, I think, is probably worth touching on. So do you have the equivalent of a pitch deck that you send to potential clients, or do you just arrange a call and sell with your charm? You didn't say charm. That's just me adding that bit there.
So what I do is, no, I don't have a pitch deck. My website is my pitch deck. So I will get contacted and say, "Hey, Mark, I've heard about you, blah, blah, blah." And I'll say, "Hey, this is great. Go onto my website, read my articles. I'll give you references if you want." So my references are an important part. But go onto my website, know exactly what I do. Then if you like the idea of what I do, then here's my Calendly link. Let's arrange a 1-hour call. It's free and it has no obligations attached to it. Let's have a 1-hour call. Tell me your problems. Tell me what you're thinking of. And even if you don't use me, at least you'll walk away with some helpful suggestions. And I have to admit, I don't land all the clients that come to me for these conversations. Sometimes they'll go to other people for various reasons, but at least I like to say to them, "You have 1 hour of a free consultation. I have lots of years of experience. Hopefully, after this conversation, whether you use me or you don't, you'll learn something new."
Sure. I think someone from JP Morgan early in my career said, if you're getting 100% conversion for every sales call you do, you're too cheap.
And that's an interesting question, right? So around pricing, and just to diverge for a second, is I would consider myself reasonable relative to my experience and what I do, but you never know what a founder might think of your pricing, especially when you find people on platforms like Upwork who say, "Oh, I'm a CTO. I only charge $35 an hour," right? You have to be a little bit wary about that. But pricing is a very interesting thing. And look, I admit I've raised my price a little bit lately because I always thought that I was coming in a little bit too cheap. And plus, you really want the people who are very serious about using you. So pricing is kind of another topic, and that you could spend hours on. But yeah, if I was very cheap and I had 100% conversion rate, I'd fill myself up with clients in the first 2 weeks, and then I wouldn't have any more room for work. So yeah, I like to be a little more selective right now.
Okay, cool. And then this next question sort of is similar to what we've already answered before. So what is your client onboarding process? So core activities, timescale. You've talked about responsibilities. Is there a clear onboarding process that you follow?
Yeah, so I usually have a playbook for the clients. So meaning that they have to get some sort of collaboration platforms for me and the developers, which is usually Slack. So I'll make them sign up for Slack if they don't have it. I'll make them sign up for AWS if they don't have it. I'll suggest tools for them to use. So I actually have on my website, I have a case study where I've come with, two young ladies from San Francisco who had an idea. They had no idea how to proceed, and I have a complete playbook of how of the steps I use to onboard them. So again, some sort of thing like Slack, some sort of cloud account, I usually would ask them to sign up for something like Jira, so that they could we could track the project management, and we can have some sort of wiki like Confluence, and we have maybe some sort of repo like Bitbucket, although sometimes they'll go to GitHub or something else. I'll make them sign up for something like Figma, so they'll have a Figma license to give their UX people. And so with a lot of the onboarding stuff, I'll make them kind of sign up for accounts so that they can own everything. Now, one of the interesting things, I've talked about some of these repair jobs I've done with startup founders. You would be amazed at how many startup founders come to me who have, for these repair jobs, who have gotten their work done by a remote development team. And the first question I ask is, okay, where is your source code? Where's your repo? Repo? What's that? I said, does the word GitHub sound familiar? No, I don't know what that is. Where's your source code? I don't know. I guess the developers have it. I'm like, do you even own the repo where your source code is? No. Do you own the cloud account where it's being deployed to? No. So the first thing I do is make sure that all of the founders sign up for everything that they need and that they own everything. And I think that as far as initial steps, that is the thing that I want to see my founders do. And then, as I mentioned before, it's diving into the specs. It's like, okay, let's talk about the product. Let's try to write the complete specs. Let's try to write all the use cases and consider everything. Then for me, once that's done, I will write all the technical specs, because I don't think that the architecture should come before the product specs, right? So every product is different. You'll need different kinds of tools, different kinds of architecture for different things. So it's up to me then to write the technical specs. It's up to me to think about how I'm going to set up the cloud architecture, and then it's hiring the development team, coming up with the backlog for the sprints, and then pressing the button and saying let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, essentially, not all agencies do that. Most agencies, like mine, does actually insist that the client give us AWS accounts, give us GitHub access. But there are so many that we take over that have exactly that same problem. All right, then, moving on to the next question. What kind of professional insurance do you use for your fractional CTO roles?
Okay, so I think it's called an error and omissions policy with an insurance company in the US. There's a couple of them out there. I'm not going to advertise, but the name starts with the letter H. And so that was recommended to me by other consultants. And so it's like a $1 million errors and omission policy.
Okay. That's mainly because you're US based, I'd assume.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, cool. Obviously, for those in the UK, there are different ones. We did do another talk on CTO Craft, so do check out the YouTube channel where this topic was also brought up there to identify that. But yeah, obviously, insurance is important because obviously you don't want to be held liable off your own name from that perspective. Okay, then. So one question from me then. As a CTO, do you have to actually believe in the products the founder has before agreeing to work with them? Or does it not matter?
I will take on almost any client as long as it doesn't violate any of my social values. So I will not do work in anything illegal. I will not do work usually for military or defense companies, and that's just me. Other people have different philosophies on that. I will not do anything that I see does not align with my own social values. But for me, as I mentioned before, I'm a mercenary, right? If a client has a product that they believe in and it doesn't conflict with my social values, I will take on that client. Sometimes, I'll be truthful. Sometimes I'll say, oh my God, this will never work in the marketplace. But, and then it's a success, right? I'm saying, wow, I didn't realize that there's this whole untapped market for meditation professionals. let's say, or something like that, right? I don't know the marketplace. And so I'm really, really pleased to see that some of my clients have become wildly successful when I said to myself, nah, this will never work. So I will take on any client as long as they believe in their product and as long as they are going to they're going to put the work into making their product successful.
Okay. And does the client's location matter to you? Because obviously being US based, do you only focus on US corporations or do you focus on UK and EU as well?
I've had a couple of clients in the UK, and sometimes it makes communication a little bit tricky, but then I'm a workaholic, right? I wake up at 5 in the morning. And so uh, as long as we can have a decent amount of overlap as far as conversations, it doesn't matter if somebody is in the UK or in the EU or whatever, right? I have to admit, I've actually had one client in India and one client in Singapore, and that's made meeting times a little bit tricky because I'd have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I've had development team meetings at 5 in the morning, but yeah, most of my clients are from the U.S.
Okay. And one from the audience: how would you deal with founders who don't do what you tell them?
Oh boy, and I've had a lot, and so look, I as a consultant, you say, I am giving you advice. You're paying me a lot of money to give you advice that I've learned the hard way, that I've learned by seeing successes and I've seen failures out there in the real world. I'm giving you my best advice. You could feel free to take it or you don't have to, but this is my best advice. And if you don't take my advice, I don't have any responsibility for the consequences. So where that's happened sometimes is with founders who think that they're project managers. And I'm sure that every consultant out there who's on this call probably has had that problem where you have a founder and the founder says, hey, Mark, I know how to run a project. Let me run the project for the development team. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to step back. You run the development meetings. You come up with the sprints. You do all that stuff. And almost to a fault, it has come back to bite them. So let the people who really have the expertise do the stuff that they're hired to do. And that's where I find that I've had my most friction with my founders are for people, they never get involved in the technology, right? So say that I haven't had a founder who tells me how to run the tech, but I have had founders who think that they know better than me at running a development organization. And that's where it gets tricky.
Okay, great. So here's a good question. So how long can a fractional role actually be? Is it best to assume the engineering hiring yourself out of the role as an exit strategy, or is actually building a long-term fractional portfolio tractable? So I think it's mainly about, are there some roles where you expect it to be a long-term engagement where you're dealing with for very years potentially, or do you think that's a lot less likely to occur?
I like to be with a client. Personally, I like to be with a client 6 to 8 months before we hire the replacement, because my main job is to get them up and running and functioning. So that's where I see my greatest value is for me to kind of take them from a complete greenfield to get something up, to get them a development team that they feel comfortable with, and to do everything and to set up everything in a way where 6 to 8 months, I will hire my replacement. And I think that if you're with a client for many years, you are probably not giving them all the value towards the end as you are at the beginning. So I like to be somebody who will kind of get them up and running, get them to their MVP stage, and then hire a replacement. Now, a lot of my clients, after I leave, they'll still be in contact with me to ask me questions, to ask me advice. Some of them will ask me to sit on their boards, which I'm very honored to do. But for me, 6 to 8 months is usually the amount of time that I like to spend with any client before I start suggesting to them, hey, you need to find yourself a permanent CTO. Or maybe it doesn't even have to be a CTO. It could be a VP of engineering, somebody who will concentrate mainly on the tactical stuff, the day-to-day running of the technology, rather than the more strategic stuff.
Okay. And actually on that, from another question, how do you exit a fractional engagement in a way that you don't get asked back 2 weeks later?
So what I do is I also have like a playbook or a checklist to make sure that everything is documented so that all architectural decisions have been memorialized, that that the owner has all of the accounts that they could access everything. They have all of the private keys to their EC2 machines, which sometimes I've seen CTOs or development companies run away with the PEM files. But I do have this kind of playbook just to make sure they know everything that's going on. And then I will kind of do a gradual transition. So what I'll say is, okay, client, you have me for 20 hours a month. Starting this month, let's reduce my hours to 10 a month. Then I'll say, let's reduce my hours to 5 a month. Then sometimes those 5 a month, I won't even be working. I'll just be around to ask for them to ask questions too. So it's a very gradual thing usually.
Okay, great. Do you ever work for equity?
No, never, never, ever, ever. And the reason why is because I've been burned a few times with equity. And I don't usually like to see my founders give up any of their equity unless they actually have to. So at this point in my life, cash is king, right? And I like to work for my beer money. I like to. I can't go to my local pub and say, "Here's a share of stock. Give me a pint." So for me, cash is king. I always work for cash, never for equity. Now I know that there are CTOs that will work for equity, and that's always an interesting negotiation. But for me, I think that the cleanest thing is to work for cash, and that also that kind of because you're not working for equity, it doesn't make you that emotionally involved in the project. So you asked before, do I have to really, really believe in the product that I'm building? And not taking equity makes it a little bit easier to keep that kind of arm's length away from the product.
Okay. Great. Okay, so one story I've definitely got to ask you about is recently you went from being in a fractional CTO position into a full-time position, and now you're back into a fractional CTO position. Talk to me about that. Why did you make the change? Did the grass look greener? And does being a fractional CTO actually give you a better lifestyle or work-life balance?
That's a really interesting question. Thanks for asking it. And so I'll give you the real life example here. So one of my clients was XP Investments. Now, I never knew about XP Investments. Most people don't know about it, but it's like the Charles Schwab of Brazil. So their mission, they started off life back in I think 2001 as a financial education institution. And then they developed into a full-fledged brokerage company like a Schwab. I don't know if they have Charles Schwab in England, so I'm not sure what the equivalent to Charles Schwab in England would be, like a full service broker, maybe a Barclays or something like that. I don't know. So at any rate, they have about 4 million retail clients. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to build a whole kind of investment bank, a whole prop trading organization around that investment bank to do trading of all sorts of different securities, mainly exotic derivatives. And they wanted to know how to build up a technical organization around there. So they found me through some recommendations, through some word of mouth. And I had them as a client, and I would get on to meetings with them a few times a week and kind of sketch out how to do a technical organization for this operation, because I do have a lot of experience with places like Citadel, at Citadel Investment Bank. We were doing the exact same thing. And so I said, the first thing you have to do is hire yourself a really good CTO. And I gave them a lot of names, and they didn't want any of these people. And they finally came back to me and said, Mark, we want you as a CTO. And I said, well, I have this nice business that I've built. I have all these clients, et cetera, and I have a great lifestyle. I'm only working 20 hours a week. I could do whatever I want. And basically, they gave me a comp package that I just could not say no to, right? I danced with the devil, right? They
threw money at you, yeah.
They threw the farm at me. And I said, okay, I'm going to do, and I told them, I'm going to do this for 1 year because my heart is really into helping startups. I really enjoy my lifestyle, and I will give you 1 year of my time. They said, fine. So I joined them. I handed my clients off to other CTOs that I knew. And I joined them for a year. I built up the organization. And then after 1 year, I said, I think it's, I honored my agreement, and now I'm leaving. And so we left on very, very good terms. They said, maybe we'll have you back as a consultant if we need you. And I said, that's fine, as long as it's kind of a few hours a week. But yeah, it was a little bit difficult because it comes with all the politics and all of the grind that you find in full-time jobs. So I went from a nice 20-hour-a-week maximum, and that 20-hour-a-week is self-imposed by myself. That's all I really want to work as a fractional CTO, to 50, 60 hours, and being pinged by my boss at 10 o'clock at night, and running the whole technical organization, and as I said, all the politics, all of the crap that I had to put up with, etc. And it was fun, right? It's fun to do that, but really my heart is in helping startups. So after a year of this, I said, I'm going back to CTO as a service, and that's where I am right now. So I'm happy. I'm grateful for my 1 year at XP. It was great helping to build something where there was nothing there. But after 1 year, I'm happy to be back helping the startups.
Okay. And in the fractional CTO space, if a CEO is pinging you at 10 o'clock at night and you answer, that's a 1 hour billable activity, I assume, so they think twice about it.
It depends, right? So some of the CEOs feel that they have the right to ping me on weekends, etc. I don't keep unlike lawyers who will start the time clock and bill in 6-minute intervals. I won't do that if somebody pings me off hours. But I will kind of make a note, and I'll say, okay, if I've had enough of these, like kind of 10-minute interruptions, I'm going to charge an hour, right? And nobody's pushed back on that. So I'm usually very receptive to getting pinged whenever, because as I said, I'm a workaholic. I enjoy helping people. But if enough of those little pings kind of accumulate, I'll bill an hour or two.
Okay. Wonderful. So we're sort of coming to the end of time now, so we should probably wrap it up. So just for everyone on the chat, there's still got some questions that are there. Mark is very much active on the CTO Craft Slack group, so feel free to throw your questions in there, probably in the interim consulting channel, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer. And yeah, thank you, Mark, for talking with us today. It's been excellent to have you here. You can connect with Mark after. So go ahead, Mark.
No. I mean, these were great questions. I really had a great time with this, and thanks to all the people who ended up joining and throwing questions into the chat room. So happy to answer these kinds of questions at any time.
Brilliant. And so I've shared Mark's contact details, which has got his LinkedIn and his website, which he mentioned a few times through there, ctoasaservice.org. And yeah, next, I think it's Thursday, actually, we have another CTO Craft Bites event, change management, leading your team through transition. So do check us out there. The link I've just shared in the chat as well. And thank you all for joining. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody.